Open your bag, Naomi. Vanessa Whitmore's voice cut through the living room so sharply that even the grandfather clock seemed to hesitate. The sentence hung in the air above the white marble floor, above the crystal bowl of orchids, above the silver tray Naomi Carter had been carrying just seconds earlier. One pearl earring rolled in a small bright circle near the leg of the piano, catching the chandelier light like it was trying to escape. Naomi stood still beside her cleaning cart, one hand wrapped around a folded dust cloth that still smelled faintly of lemon polish and bleach. She did not blink. She did not argue. But every person in the room had already turned toward her, and that was how these things always began. Not with proof. Not with truth. With eyes. Lily Whitmore stood halfway down the curved staircase, her fingers resting against the cold brass railing. She had come down because she heard her mother yelling, but now she stayed frozen where she was, staring at the small velvet jewelry box lying open on the coffee table. Empty. Her mother's diamond bracelet was gone, and in the silence that followed, the accusation had found the easiest place to land. Naomi, the black maid, the woman in a pale gray uniform with soft-soled shoes and careful hands. Vanessa took one slow step forward, her silk robe whispering against itself, her face tight with the kind of anger that liked an audience. "No one leaves this room," she said, louder now, as if the house itself needed to obey her. "That bracelet was here 20 minutes ago." Naomi lowered her eyes for one brief second, not in shame, but in discipline, like someone holding a door shut against a storm. She had worked in houses like this long enough to know that once a rich woman decided what a poor woman looked like, the room usually followed. The air smelled expensive in the worst way, all gardenia perfume and polished wood and money that had never once been told no. Near the hallway, Martha Doyle, the head housekeeper, pressed her lips together and looked away too quickly. Daniel Brooks from security stood with his hands folded in front of him, waiting for instructions he already seemed prepared to carry out. Edward Whitmore, still in his navy suit from the office, said nothing at all. His silence settled into the room like a second accusation. Naomi could feel the weight of her own name tag against her chest. Naomi Carter. She had pinned it on at 7 o'clock that morning after checking her phone for the pharmacy reminder she could not afford to ignore. Her mother's heart medication was due Friday. Rent was due Monday. Missing one shift mattered. Losing this job would rip through her life like a crack through glass. Still, when Vanessa pointed at the worn leather tote hanging from Naomi's cart and said, "Search it," Naomi did not reach for the bag. She looked up instead, calm enough to make the room uneasy, and when she spoke, her voice was low and even, almost gentle. "I didn't steal from this house." It was not a plea. It was not a defense made for sympathy. It was a fact placed carefully in the center of the room, and for a moment even Lily felt it land. Then Vanessa laughed once, cold and humorless, and the sound echoed against the windows. "That's what they all say," she replied. On the stairs, Lily's stomach tightened, because something about the way Naomi stood there, surrounded and still dignified, did not look like guilt. It looked like someone bracing for a wound she had seen coming long before anyone else in the room. Daniel Brooks stepped forward at last, not quickly, not cruelly, but with the practiced caution of a man who had spent years carrying out other people's certainty. The polished floor reflected the dark shine of his shoes as he stopped beside Naomi's cart. "Ma'am," he said, glancing at Vanessa before looking back at Naomi, "I am going to need to see inside your bag." Naomi's fingers loosened from the dust cloth, then folded neatly in front of her apron. Her face stayed composed, but a pulse moved once at the base of her throat. Lily saw it from the staircase and hated that she noticed something so small only because the rest of the room had gone so cold. Edward shifted near the fireplace, one hand still holding his phone, though the screen had gone black minutes ago. He looked like he wanted this to be over more than he wanted it to be right. Vanessa, on the other hand, looked sharpened by it. Her chin stayed lifted, her diamond studs catching the chandelier light in brief. "White sparks." "Well," she said, "unless there is a reason you are stalling." Naomi turned her head slightly, just enough to look at Daniel directly. "You can check it," she said, "but you are not going to find your bracelet." Her voice remained even, and that steadiness seemed to irritate Vanessa more than denial would have. Martha gave a thin sigh from near the doorway, the kind meant to say she had seen this before. I told you we should have kept the valuables locked, she murmured, not quite under her breath. Naomi heard it. Lily knew she heard it, because one of her hands tightened for a second before going still again. Daniel reached for the leather tote and placed it carefully on the glass coffee table beside the empty jewelry box. The zipper sounded louder than it should have. One by one he removed a paperback Bible with worn corners, a drugstore wallet, a pack of peppermint gum, hand lotion, a bus pass, and a folded receipt from a pharmacy in Greenwich dated that morning at 8:12. No bracelet. He checked the inside pocket, then the side compartments, then the bottom of the bag with slow, thorough hands. Nothing. The silence afterward felt stranger than the accusation. Vanessa's expression changed, but only for a second. Not embarrassment. Not relief. Irritation. Then it is somewhere else, she said immediately. Check the cart. Daniel glanced up, perhaps hoping Edward might step in now, but Edward only rubbed his jaw and looked away toward the windows where the late afternoon sky had turned the color of steel. Naomi's cleaning cart stood beside her like a witness no one respected. The spray bottles were lined up in order. The microfiber cloths were folded into neat squares. A pair of yellow gloves hung from the side hook, still damp from the upstairs bathroom. Daniel bent and began checking the shelves. Furniture polish, glass cleaner, trash liners, a stack of fresh hand towels. On the lowest tray sat the small white envelope Naomi used to keep her lunch money and bus fare separate. Daniel opened it gently. Inside were 3 $5 bills, for singles, and a row of quarters. Lily felt heat climb her neck. $15 and change. That was all. $15 and change sitting under a room full of crystal and art and old money, as if the contrast itself were somehow proof. Naomi did not move. Her eyes stayed forward, fixed on nothing Lily could see. Then, very softly, she said, "Check the hallway camera." The room did not react at first. The words seemed too calm to be disruptive. But Lily straightened on the stairs because she knew something no one else in that room did. And suddenly the memory returned with painful clarity. 3 nights earlier, after hearing someone open the jewelry room long after midnight, she had slipped a hidden nanny camera behind a carved porcelain vase on the shelf across from the vanity. She had never told her mother. She had never told anyone. Below her, Vanessa's face went still in a way that made Lily's stomach drop. "That camera has not worked in weeks," Vanessa said. But this time, before Naomi could answer, Lily heard her own voice cut through the room. "That is not the one she means." Lily's words landed with a force that did not come from volume, but from timing. Every head turned toward her at once. For a moment she wished she could take them back, not because they were wrong, but because she could already feel the room changing around them. Vanessa looked up at her daughter with a tightness in her face that had nothing to do with surprise and everything to do with control slipping an inch at a time. "Lily," she said carefully, the way people spoke when they wanted to sound calm more than they wanted to be honest, "go upstairs." But Lily stayed where she was, one hand still on the brass railing, the other curled into the sleeve of her cream sweater. The house suddenly felt too bright, too polished, too airless. "I put a camera in the jewelry room," she said. "A small one, behind the porcelain vase on the left shelf." Daniel blinked. Edward lowered his hand from his jaw. Martha's shoulders stiffened so slightly most people would have missed it, but Naomi did not. Naomi saw everything now, not with panic, with the steady alertness of someone who had been underestimated long enough to learn the sound of truth before it arrived. Vanessa let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but it came out brittle. "Why would you do something like that?" she asked. "Because things kept going missing," Lily replied. "Small things. Not enough for anyone to care, but enough for me to notice." Her voice shook at the edges, though she kept speaking. "And because every time something was misplaced in this house, everybody looked at the same person." She did not turn toward Naomi when she said it. She did not need to. The words were already standing beside her. A hush spread through the room, thinner and sharper than the one before. Outside, bare branches scratched softly against the tall windows as evening settled over the grounds. Daniel straightened. "Miss Whitmore, do you know where the feed goes?" Lily nodded. "My tablet. It backs up to the family room television too." Edward looked at her, as if seeing a part of his daughter he had not made time to know. "You set that up yourself?" he asked quietly. "Yes." The answer seemed to humble him more than it impressed him. Vanessa's eyes hardened. "This is ridiculous," she said. We are not turning the house upside down because a teenager got paranoid. But Lily came down another step, then another, and the soft soles of her socks made no sound on the runner. No, she said, her voice stronger now. We are doing it because you accused someone without proof. The words fell cleanly into the room. Naomi lowered her gaze for a moment, not out of weakness, but because being defended after being doubted was its own kind of pain. Martha moved first, heading toward the service hallway with a muttered excuse about checking the laundry rotation, but Daniel stepped in front of her before she got far. He did it politely, almost apologetically, yet the meaning was clear. No one was leaving now. The grandfather clock resumed its measured ticking from the far wall, each second pressing harder into the silence. Lily reached the bottom of the staircase and crossed to the narrow console table where her tablet was charging beneath a lamp with a linen shade. Her fingers trembled only once as she unplugged it. Naomi watched her, and something unspoken passed between them, not comfort exactly, but recognition. One woman with no power in the house she worked in. One girl with less power than people assumed in the house she lived in. Lily tapped the screen, entered her passcode, and pulled up the camera app. The glow lit her face from below, pale and determined. The recording starts at 3:14. She said. That was about 10 minutes before Mom started yelling. No one answered. Even Vanessa had gone quiet. Lily swallowed, then turned the tablet toward the television and pressed connect. The black screen flickered once, then again, and the jewelry room appeared in grainy color beneath the chandelier light. Naomi's reflection shivered faintly across the dark glass of the television. Beside her, Vanessa went very still. And in that stillness, before the first real frame could tell its story, Lily understood something she had not wanted to know about her own mother. Innocent people flinch in fear, but guilty people freeze in calculation. The screen glowed above the fireplace, washing the room in a cold blue light that made everyone look slightly unreal, like people caught inside someone else's memory. For a few seconds nothing happened. The jewelry room sat empty and immaculate, all mirrored surfaces and velvet boxes, the kind of room designed more for display than comfort. A crystal tray reflected the overhead chandelier in tiny fractured stars. On the left shelf, the porcelain vase Lily had mentioned stood perfectly still, innocent and decorative, hiding the eye that had seen everything. Daniel folded his hands behind his back. Edward stared at the screen with the fixed concentration of a man realizing that truth had become a public event inside his own home. Vanessa stood near the coffee table, one hand resting against the edge so lightly it seemed she was afraid to leave fingerprints. Naomi remained beside her cart, quiet, upright, almost separate from the room now, as if she had stopped expecting fairness and was waiting only for facts. On the television, the timestamp in the corner changed from 3:14 to 3:15. Then Naomi appeared. She entered the jewelry room carrying a fresh arrangement of white roses and a small bottle of water for the orchids near the vanity. Her movements were exactly what Lily knew them to be from months of watching her in the house without really seeing her. Efficient, careful, almost gentle. She set the roses down, adjusted the angle of the vase by less than an inch, wiped a water ring from the marble counter with a cloth from her apron pocket, and straightened one framed photograph that had drifted slightly crooked. She did not open a drawer. She did not touch the velvet box. She did not even glance at it. The room behind the screen remained silent except for the small electronic hum of the television. Lily could hear her own breathing now, shallow and uneven. On the screen, Naomi finished arranging the flowers, stepped back to check the balance of the room the way a person might check a bed after smoothing the corners, then left. The door clicked shut behind her. Timestamp 3:16. No bracelet in her hands. No hesitation. No theft. Just work. In the living room, something invisible shifted. It did not feel like relief. Relief would have been warm. This was colder than that. Vanessa's face did not soften. It tightened. Martha lowered her eyes to the floor, then lifted them again too quickly. Daniel looked from the screen to Naomi and then away, and the shame in that brief movement was sharper than an apology. Edward exhaled through his nose and rubbed the back of his neck. Well, he said, but the word died before it formed into anything useful. Vanessa straightened and found her voice first. That only proves she did not take it then, she said. It does not prove she did not come back. Naomi did not respond. Lily did. Keep watching. Her voice was quiet, but now there was steel in it. She moved closer to the television, tablet held against her chest like a shield. The timestamp rolled forward. 3 minutes passed on the screen, with no one entering. The room in the video remained untouched, too still, too elegant, too sure of its own innocence. Then at 3:19 the door opened again. Martha stepped inside. She looked over her shoulder before closing the door, not once but twice. And even before she crossed the room, Lily felt the truth arrive like a drop in pressure before a storm. Martha moved toward the vanity with quick, practiced steps that did not belong to someone checking on flowers or dusting a shelf. She reached for the velvet box, opened it, and paused. In the living room, Vanessa's hand slipped from the edge of the coffee table. No one spoke. On the screen, Martha removed the diamond bracelet, held it up beneath the chandelier for one bright second, and then turned toward the doorway, as if listening for footsteps outside. Lily felt her heart pound, so hard it hurt. Beside the card, Naomi did not move at all. It was the stillness of someone who had spent too many years preparing for injustice, and had never stopped hoping to be wrong. On the screen, Martha did not admire the bracelet for long. She closed her fingers around it almost immediately, as if she had done this kind of thing before and knew better than to let beauty slow her down. She looked toward the door again, then crossed to the rolling linen hamper parked near the far wall of the jewelry room. It was one of the smaller hampers, the kind used upstairs for guest bath towels and hand cloths, lined with crisp white fabric and smelling faintly of starch even through the screen. With one quick motion, Martha lifted the folded top towel, slid the bracelet beneath the stack, and smoothed everything flat again until the surface looked untouched. The simplicity of it made Lily feel sick. Not because it was clever, but because it was ordinary. Ordinary enough to suggest practice. Beside the fireplace, Daniel lowered his head a fraction, the way people do when they realize they have already helped the wrong side of a story. Edward took one slow step back and let his hand fall to his side. The room around him looked suddenly unfamiliar, as if the expensive art and polished wood had become props in a house built on appearances instead of trust. Naomi still stood near the cleaning cart with that same contained stillness, but Lily could see the change in her now. It was not relief. It was exhaustion without movement, the kind that settles deep when a person survives exactly what she knew might happen. Vanessa was the only one who spoke. "This proves Martha handled it," she said too quickly. Perhaps she was moving it for inventory. Organizing. There are explanations. Her voice was smooth, but the smoothness had turned brittle, like glass under pressure. Martha looked up from where she stood in the living room, and for the first time fear showed plainly on her face. "Mrs. Whitmore, I can explain," she whispered, though she had not explained anything yet. Lily did not take her eyes off the television. "No," she said. "You can wait." On the screen, Martha pulled out her phone and tapped something quickly with her thumb. The movement was small, easy to miss, but the hidden camera had caught it cleanly. Then she turned her head toward the door again, not startled this time, but expectant. Lily felt her pulse jump. Daniel noticed it too. Edward stared hard at the screen now, every line in his face sharpening. Naomi drew in one quiet breath and let it out slowly through her nose. The jewelry room door opened. No one in the living room moved. The person who stepped inside wore a cream silk blouse and a narrow gold watch that caught the chandelier light before her face fully turned toward the camera. Lily felt all the air leave her body at once. Vanessa. On the television, her mother entered the room with measured calm, closing the door softly behind her. She did not look confused. She did not look surprised. She looked like someone arriving exactly when expected. Martha straightened at once, her posture changing in that strange, obedient way people have around power. Vanessa said something the camera could not clearly catch, then glanced toward the hamper where the bracelet had been hidden. Even without sound, the meaning traveled across the room like a blade. In the living room, the real Vanessa went pale beneath her makeup. Edward turned to look at her, slowly this time, like a man afraid of what his own eyes might confirm. Lily could hear the clock ticking again, each second louder than the last. And then, on the screen, her mother reached into her pocket, pulled out Naomi's folded employee schedule from that morning, and placed it carefully on top of the hamper, as if marking the spot where blame was supposed to land. For one long second, no one in the living room seemed able to breathe. The television cast its cold light across the marble floor, across the roses Naomi had arranged less than an hour earlier, across the faces of people who suddenly looked stripped of every title they had ever hidden behind. Lily stared at the screen as if staring hard enough might change what she had just seen, might turn the cream silk blouse into someone else's, might make the folded employee schedule vanish from the top of the linen hamper. But it stayed there, plain and undeniable, Naomi's name visible even from across the room. Naomi Carter. Monday through Saturday, 8 o'clock to 6. A working woman's life reduced to a prop in someone else's lie. Edward was the first to move. He did not lunge or shout. He simply turned toward Vanessa with the slow disbelief of a man who had spent years mistaking elegance for character. "Tell me that is not what it looks like," he said, and the quietness in his voice was worse than anger. Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, then lifted her chin as if posture alone could rebuild control. "Edward, listen to me," she said. "This is being interpreted out of context." Lily let out a sound that was almost a laugh, except there was no humor in it at all. "Out of context," she repeated. "You put Naomi's schedule on the hamper." Her voice shook now, not from weakness, but from heartbreak, finally finding somewhere to go. "You wanted them to find it there." On the screen the video kept running. Vanessa in the recording gestured toward the hamper, said something to Martha that the hidden camera could not fully catch, then touched the edge of the folded schedule with one manicured finger before leaving the room. Martha remained behind for a second, glancing nervously toward the door, then followed. The jewelry room went still again, beautiful and silent and false. Daniel reached for the remote and paused the video on the frame with the schedule sitting atop the towels like a signature. The click of the pause button sounded final. Martha swayed slightly where she stood, one hand going to the back of a dining chair for support. "Mrs. Whitmore told me it was only temporary," she said, her voice thin and frayed. "She said she only wanted to teach her boundaries. She said Miss Lily was getting too attached, that the staff had started forgetting their place." The words dropped into the room one at a time, each one uglier than the last. Naomi lowered her eyes, and this time Lily knew why. Not shame. Grief. The kind that comes when the worst thing about people is not that they look down on you, but that they call it order when they do. Edward's face changed in a way Lily had never seen before. Not the polished irritation he wore after bad meetings. Not the distant restraint he carried through charity galas and private dinners. This was something rawer, quieter, and far more dangerous to vanity. It was recognition. He turned back to Vanessa. "You framed her," he said. Vanessa straightened. "At once. Do not use that word." "What word would you prefer?" Lily asked, and now she was crying without wiping the tears away. Humiliated? Set up? Sacrificed? Naomi finally spoke then, and because she had waited so long, every person in the room listened. "Miss Lily," she said softly, "you do not have to fight for me like this." Lily looked at her, stunned by the gentleness of it. After everything, after the bag, the cart, the looks, the silence, Naomi's voice held no poison at all, only weariness and grace and something that made everyone else smaller by comparison. Then Naomi lifted her gaze to Vanessa, calm as winter light, and said, "You did not want the bracelet back. You wanted me gone." Vanessa did not answer right away. She stood beneath the chandelier with her shoulders square and her mouth set in that familiar line Lily had seen at fundraisers, board dinners, and school meetings, the line that always appeared when her mother had decided that image mattered more than truth. But tonight the line did not look elegant. It looked tired. The silk at her sleeve trembled once as she crossed her arms. "You are making this uglier than it is," she said at last, her voice low and clipped. "No one was trying to destroy anyone. I want a distance. That is all." Lily stared at her as if the room had shifted 6 inches off its foundation. "Distance?" she repeated. "You accused her of stealing." Vanessa lifted her chin. "I was trying to make a point." The words settled into the room like dust after something fragile had shattered. Naomi lowered her gaze for a moment, then looked back up, and what struck Lily most was not anger. It was the absence of surprise. Naomi had not just endured this house tonight. In some quiet, painful way, she had understood it long before any of them did. Edward took a slow breath, the kind people take when they realize the version of their life they have been living is no longer available to them. "What point, Vanessa?" he asked. That our daughter should not speak to the staff like they are family, Vanessa said, and now the truth was coming out in sharp, polished pieces. That lines matter. That grief does not erase them. Ever since Naomi came here, Lily has been in the kitchen, after school, in the laundry room, in the garden with her, asking questions, bringing her tea, sitting on the counter like this is some kind of storybook. It is not healthy. Lily could barely hear the last two words over the sound of her own pulse. Healthy. As if kindness had become a medical concern in this house. As if the only dangerous thing in the room was attachment. Naomi's cart still stood beside her, the spray bottles catching blue television light, her folded cloth stacked with the same care she gave everything else. Lily remembered the first time Naomi had found her crying in the pantry last winter, 2 weeks after her little brother Caleb died. Naomi had not offered speeches. She had not said time heals. She had just handed her a mug of cinnamon tea and stayed on the floor beside her until the shaking passed. No cameras. No audience. No lesson. Just presence. And now Lily understood that was what her mother could not stand. Not Naomi's position in the house, but her place in Lily's heart. Martha wiped at the corner of her mouth with trembling fingers. Mrs. Whitmore said if Miss Naomi left on her own, there would be no scandal, she whispered. She said people would assume it was for personal reasons. She said no one would be harmed. Daniel closed his eyes for one brief second, then opened them again and looked at Edward. Sir, he said carefully, the bracelet is still in the upstairs hamper if no one has moved it. Edward nodded once, but his eyes remained on Vanessa. Go get it, he said. Daniel left without another word, his footsteps fading into the wide hallway. The silence he left behind was heavier than before. Vanessa seemed smaller now, though no one had moved closer to her. Lily could smell the roses Naomi had arranged, fresh and clean, and almost unbearably gentle in the middle of all this ugliness. Then Naomi reached up, unpinned her name tag from her uniform, and placed it on top of the coffee table beside the empty velvet box. The soft click it made against the glass was barely louder than a breath, but every person in the room felt it. You do not have to force me out anymore, she said quietly. I was already preparing to leave. The words settled over the room, with a strange softness that made them hit even harder. Lily looked at Naomi as if she had misheard her, as if there had to be some missing piece between accusation and resignation, some hidden step nobody else had seen. But Naomi did not take the words back. She stood beside her cart in the pale gray uniform she had worn since morning, her shoulders level, her hands quiet. And in that stillness Lily understood something almost unbearable. Naomi had been carrying this goodbye long before the bracelet disappeared. Edward stared at her. Preparing to leave? He said, the question sounding smaller than the room around it. Naomi nodded once. I gave notice to the agency this afternoon, she replied. 2 weeks, starting today. Vanessa's face changed again, not into remorse, not yet, but into the startled expression of someone who had been planning control and discovered she never had it. Why? Lily asked before anyone else could speak. Her voice came out thin, younger than she wanted it to. Naomi turned toward her, and the kindness in her eyes almost made Lily cry again. Because I knew this house had started making room for me in every way except the one that matters, she said. It welcomed my work. Not me. The sentence left the room quieter than any accusation had. The grandfather clock ticked once, then again, each second sounding suddenly loud against the glass and marble and old money. Daniel's footsteps returned from the upstairs hallway before anyone could answer. He came back, carrying the bracelet in a clear evidence pouch from the security office, though the effort to make it official only made the shame in the room feel heavier. The diamonds flashed beneath the lights, cold and useless. He set the pouch on the coffee table beside Naomi's name tag and the empty velvet box. 3 objects. 1 truth. 1 lie. 1 woman's dignity laid out in silence. Martha covered her mouth with both hands and sank into the nearest chair as if her knees had stopped trusting the floor. Edward did not look at the bracelet. He looked at Naomi. Why did you not say anything? He asked. If you felt unwelcome, why did you keep coming back? Naomi glanced at the pouch, then at the roses, then at Lily. Because your daughter was hurting, she said simply. And because pain notices kindness even when power does not. Lily's breath caught. The words did not feel dramatic. They felt true in the hardest way. She remembered winter afternoons in the kitchen when Naomi would warm cinnamon rolls left over from brunch and pretend not to notice when Lily stayed there too long. She remembered the garden bench in February, Naomi wrapping a blanket over Lily's knees without a word. She remembered being seen without being studied, comforted without being managed. Vanessa looked away first. Edward's face tightened, then softened into something worn and human. "Naomi," he said, and his voice faltered on her name for the first time. "I failed you." Naomi did not rush to fill the silence after that. She let it stand there, which somehow made it more honest. Then Lily crossed the room. She did not think about whether her mother would object, or whether the staff would notice, or whether grief had made her too attached, too soft, too something. She just walked until she stood directly in front of Naomi, close enough to smell the faint lemon polish on her sleeves and the clean cotton scent of fresh laundry. Her eyes burned. "Please do not leave because of this," she whispered. Naomi's expression did not harden. If anything, it grew sadder. She reached up, very gently, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind Lily's ear the way she had once done in the pantry months ago. "I am not leaving because of tonight," she said. "Tonight only proved I was right to go." Lily stood there with Naomi's hand still near her hair, feeling the room blur around the edges. The chandelier light, the marble floor, the silver tray, even the cold sparkle of the bracelet inside the clear pouch all seemed to belong to some other family, some other house, some other evening, where people still believed money could polish cruelty into something respectable. Naomi stepped back first, not far, just enough to return a little space between them, and the loss of that warmth felt immediate. Edward looked down at the coffee table as if the objects arranged there had become evidence in a trial no lawyer could fix. Naomi's name tag, the velvet box, the bracelet. He reached for the tag with careful fingers, then stopped before touching it. "I did not even know you gave notice," he said. "The agency sent the email." "At 4:30, Naomi replied. "I assumed no one had read it yet." Edward let out a breath that sounded almost like shame. "I did not." Naomi nodded. "I know." That answer struck Lily harder than anything else, because it carried no accusation, only the dull familiarity of being overlooked. Vanessa moved toward the bar cart near the windows, then stopped halfway, as though she had forgotten what people usually did when a room turned against them. "I was trying to protect my daughter," she said, but even she seemed to hear how hollow it sounded. Lily turned to her slowly. "From what?" she asked. "From being cared for by someone you could not control?" Vanessa flinched as if the question had found its target before she could raise a shield. Outside, wind brushed the long panes of glass, and somewhere deeper in the house a door clicked softly in the service hall. The sound made the silence feel wider. Martha wiped at her eyes and stared down at her lap. "Miss Naomi never crossed a line," she whispered. "She always asked before staying late. Always left the room when family came in. She did everything right." Daniel remained near the television, shoulders squared, but the certainty he had worn earlier was gone. In its place was something quieter and more difficult. Regret. Naomi bent beside her cart and reached for the folded navy cardigan she wore on the drive home. She draped it over one arm, then closed the top compartment with deliberate care, as though finishing a task mattered even now. Lily watched every small movement. It was how Naomi had always been, gentle with objects, respectful with space, never taking more room than she was given, even when she deserved far more. Edward finally looked up. "You are not going back to the agency tonight," he said. "Not like this." Naomi met his gaze. "I do not think staying one more hour changes what happened here." "Then let me change what happens next," he replied. His voice was low, stripped of polish, and for the first time all evening Lily heard her father as a man instead of a host, a provider, a figure at the head of a long table. Naomi studied him, not with anger, but with the tired caution of someone who had seen apologies offered too late and too neatly. Lily could feel the whole house waiting with her. Then Naomi glanced toward the staircase, toward the dark hallway that led to the pantry, toward the kitchen where grief had once found her in pieces and she had not been left there alone. "I stayed because Lily needed kindness," she said. "But tonight showed me something else." Her eyes moved across the room, over Vanessa, over Martha, over Edward, over the bracelet shining in its plastic sleeve like a tiny captured lie. This house needed truth even more. The room stayed still after Naomi spoke, as if the truth had moved through it and left everyone listening for what they had missed all along. Edward looked toward the dark television screen, then to the paused frame of Vanessa's hand placing Naomi's schedule on the hamper, and something in his face settled into decision. "Daniel," he said quietly, "save the footage to a separate drive and send a copy to my private email and to legal." Vanessa turned so fast the silk at her shoulder caught the light like a blade. "Edward, that is not necessary." He did not raise his voice. "It became necessary the moment my wife accused an innocent woman in front of this household." The word innocent seemed to land hardest on Naomi, not because she had doubted herself, but because hearing it this late carried its own sorrow. Lily watched her father cross the room and stand beside the coffee table. He picked up Naomi's name tag at last, turning it over once in his hand as if it weighed more than it should. "I should have read the room before I read the evidence," he said, staring at the little plastic rectangle. "I should have stopped this the moment her bag came onto this table." Naomi said nothing. She did not rescue him from the discomfort. That, Lily realized, was part of what made her different from everyone else in the room. She did not rush to smooth over what should hurt. Vanessa pressed a hand to her temple. "You are making a family matter sound criminal." Martha let out a broken breath from the chair. "It was criminal to me," she whispered. "You told me no one would get hurt." Vanessa looked at her with disbelief, as if betrayal were only offensive when it moved upward. Daniel stepped toward the television console and began removing the memory card from the system Lily had connected. The tiny click it made sounded precise, final, official. Outside, rain had started without anyone noticing. Fine streaks of water ran down the tall windows, silver in the garden lights. Lily could smell the damp earth through the old wood of the house and the faint, clean scent of lemon from Naomi's cart, and both smells felt more honest than anything money had bought for this room. Edward placed the name tag back on the table, this time beside the bracelet pouch instead of apart from it. Then he turned to Naomi. "You will be paid in full for the next 2 weeks whether you return or not," he said. "And Martha will not work here another day." Martha bowed her head, accepting it before he finished. But Naomi's eyes did not shift to Martha. They stayed on Edward. "That is not enough," she said softly. Vanessa gave a bitter laugh. "Of course it is not enough. It never is." Lily flinched, but Naomi did not. "No," Naomi replied, calm as ever. "Because this was never about money." The rain tapped more firmly against the glass now, steady and patient. Edward's shoulders lowered a fraction, as if he knew he had been waiting to be told what real repair would cost. "Then tell me," he said. Naomi glanced at Lily first, then back at him. "Your daughter should never again have to prove that kindness belongs in her own home," she said. "And no one who works here should have to wonder whether one accusation can erase their humanity." The words stayed in the air long after she finished. Vanessa looked away. Daniel stopped moving. Even Martha raised her face. Lily felt tears gather again. But this time, they did not come from grief alone. They came from hearing someone name the wound correctly. Edward nodded once, slow and sober, like a man taking an oath no audience had asked for. "Then that is where I start," he said. And for the first time all evening, Naomi did not look tired. She looked unconvinced. Naomi's silence after Edward's promise stretched long enough for everyone to feel the difference between regret and repair. Rain moved in silver lines down the windows, blurring the dark lawn beyond the glass, and somewhere upstairs a vent clicked on with a low mechanical hum. The house kept going, polished and expensive and oblivious, but the people inside it no longer could. Edward reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his phone, and placed it on the coffee table beside the bracelet pouch and Naomi's name tag. He tapped the screen, scrolled once, then pressed call. "Who are you calling?" Vanessa asked, and for the first time that evening there was something unguarded in her voice. Fear did not make her louder. It made her smaller. Edward did not look at her. "The agency," he said, and then the household staff line. Vanessa stared at him. "In front of them?" "Yes," he replied. "In front of the people who watched you accuse her. In front of the people who learned tonight exactly how fragile dignity becomes when it depends on wealth." The call connected. A woman from the staffing agency answered with practiced warmth, but that warmth faltered when Edward identified himself and asked her not to interrupt. He spoke plainly, each sentence stripped of performance. He said Naomi Carter had submitted notice earlier that afternoon. He said she had been falsely accused in his home. He said the accusation had been based not on evidence, but on a deliberate setup. He said the fault did not belong to Naomi, and he wanted that formally documented in her file before the end of the night. Lily watched Naomi as he spoke. Naomi's face did not brighten. It softened only slightly, the way ice softens at the edges without yet becoming water. When the agency representative asked whether Naomi wished to continue her assignment, Edward looked at her, but Naomi did not answer immediately. She folded her cardigan over her arm once more, smoothing the sleeve with her fingertips. "My file matters," she said at last. "My peace matters more." Edward closed his eyes briefly, then told the woman that Naomi's resignation would stand unless she changed it herself, freely and without pressure. He ended the call and placed the phone face down on the glass. No one spoke. Then he picked it up again and dialed the internal staff line that rang in the kitchen, the laundry room, and the service corridor. It was late enough that only the evening team would answer, but that was still enough. When the line clicked open, Edward said, "This is Mr. Whitmore. I need everyone on duty to hear me." His voice echoed faintly through the speaker. An accusation was made tonight against Naomi Carter. It was false. She was wronged in this house, and that wrong came from this family, not from her. I am saying that clearly because silence would repeat the harm. In the quiet that followed, even Daniel looked stunned. Lily had never heard her father speak without hiding behind polished language. Now every word landed clean. Vanessa turned toward the windows, her reflection wavering in the rain-dark glass. "You are humiliating me," she said, almost to herself. Naomi looked at her then, really looked at her, and the room seemed to pause around that gaze. "No," Naomi said gently. "The truth is only removing what pride was covering." Vanessa's shoulders dropped, and suddenly she looked less like a woman of authority than a mother standing in the ruins of her own choices. "You took her from me," she whispered, looking at Lily. "After Caleb died, she stopped talking to me. She talked to you." Lily felt the words like a cold draft under a locked door. Naomi did not step toward Vanessa. She did not claim victory. She only said, "I was never trying to take your daughter. I was trying to keep her company in a house full of people too broken to sit beside her grief." The rain went on tapping at the windows. Vanessa covered her mouth and began to cry without elegance, without control, without the protection of posture. And Naomi, the woman they had searched like a suspect less than an hour earlier, was the only one in the room who did not look away. Vanessa's tears did not change the room right away. They only made the silence more human. Rain tapped softly against the windows, and the chandelier light trembled across the glass coffee table where the bracelet pouch, the empty velvet box, and Naomi's name tag still lay side by side like three small verdicts. Lily looked at her mother and saw, maybe for the first time, not a villain from a distance, but a woman who had mistaken control for love so long that she no longer knew the difference. Edward stood motionless near the fireplace, his hands at his sides, as if he understood that any word spoken too quickly now would sound like management instead of remorse. Naomi was the one who moved first. She crossed to her cleaning cart and placed her folded cardigan on the top shelf beside the glass cleaner and the neatly stacked cloths. The gesture was simple, almost ordinary, yet it steadied the entire room. She was not performing dignity. She was living inside it. Vanessa lowered her hands from her face, her mascara faintly blurred beneath her eyes, her voice small when it came. "I thought if Lily needed you less, she would come back to me." Lily closed her eyes for a second because the sadness in that sentence was real, even if the choice behind it had been cruel. Naomi turned toward her slowly. "People do not return to love by being frightened away from comfort," she said. "They return when they feel safe enough to trust it again." Vanessa looked down at the marble floor, at the reflection of the chandelier broken beneath her feet. "I did not know how to reach her after Caleb," she whispered. "Every room in this house reminded me of him. Every hallway. Every toy left in a basket. And then she would sit with you in the kitchen and laugh for 5 minutes. And I hated that I could hear joy coming from a room I could not enter." Lily felt the words deep in her chest, not as accusation, but as truth arriving too late to spare anyone. She remembered those kitchen afternoons clearly now. Naomi never filled the silence with advice. She just made tea, warmed soup, or peeled apples and long quiet ribbons while grief sat between them like another person at the table. Naomi had not replaced a mother. She had simply done what the house had stopped doing. She had made space for pain without trying to control it. Edward finally stepped closer, but not toward Vanessa. Toward Lily. He stopped beside her and rested a hand lightly against the back of the sofa, careful not to crowd her. "I cannot undo tonight," he said, looking at Naomi first and then at his daughter. "But I can stop pretending the damage began tonight." It did not. It began every time this house chose appearance over honesty. Naomi studied him for a long moment, and Lily could almost feel her weighing whether his words had roots or only sound. Then Naomi reached into the apron pocket she had not yet emptied and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. She placed it on the coffee table beside her name tag. It was her resignation notice, printed from the agency portal and signed in blue ink. Edward stared at it. Vanessa did too. But Lily noticed something the others did not. Naomi's hand remained on the paper for 1 second longer than necessary, not because she was uncertain, but because letting go of a place where you had tried to do good was its own kind of mourning. "I am still leaving," Naomi said softly. Lily's breath caught. Naomi turned to her and offered the smallest, saddest smile. "But I am not leaving angry." The room received those words in silence, and for the first time that evening the silence did not feel cold. It felt honest. Naomi lifted her hand from the resignation notice and began putting away the last few things on her cart with the same care she had used to fold towels, polish glass, and steady a grieving girl through long winter afternoons. She tucked the dust cloth into the side pocket, tightened the cap on the lemon cleaner, and straightened the stack of fresh hand towels that no one would need tonight. Every small movement seemed to return the room to its true scale. The chandelier still glittered. The marble still shone. The bracelet still flashed inside its clear pouch. But none of it looked powerful anymore. Only fragile. Lily stepped closer, her tears quieter now, no longer falling from shock, but from the slow ache of knowing that some people leave with raised voices and slammed doors, and others leave with such grace that the whole house feels ashamed for not deserving them. "Will I ever see you again?" she asked. Naomi looked at her, and in that look there was no distance at all. "Yes," she said softly, "but not like this." Then she reached into the front pocket of her apron and pulled out a folded recipe card, soft at the edges from being handled often. She placed it in Lily's palm and closed Lily's fingers around it. "Peach cobbler," she said, "the way your brother liked it. Extra cinnamon. You were always the one who remembered that part." Lily stared down at the card through blurred eyes. The handwriting was neat and steady, blue ink on an old cream card. It felt warmer than paper should. Vanessa let out a broken breath at the mention of Caleb, but Naomi did not turn away from her pain or feed it either. She simply let it exist in the room beside everything else. Edward picked up Naomi's name tag from the coffee table and crossed to her slowly. He held it out with both hands, not like an employer returning a uniform piece, but like a man returning something he had no right to make small. Naomi looked at it for a moment, then took it and placed it gently on the top shelf of her cart. Not discarded, not reclaimed, just set down where it belonged, among the tools of work she had done with dignity in a place that had not always offered any back. Daniel moved to the hallway and opened the front door before anyone asked. Cool air drifted in with the smell of rain and wet stone, fresh and clean and strangely merciful. Naomi wrapped her cardigan around her shoulders and placed one hand on the cart handle. Martha rose shakily from the chair and whispered, "I am sorry," but Naomi only nodded. Some apologies, Lily realized, were not answers. They were just beginnings. Vanessa stepped forward at last, her face bare of all the composure she had worn like jewelry. "Naomi," she said, and her voice nearly failed on the name. "I do not deserve your forgiveness." Naomi met her eyes without bitterness. "No," she said gently, "but your daughter deserves your honesty." The words seemed to settle into Vanessa more deeply than any punishment could. Naomi then turned to Lily, opened her arms, and Lily went to her without hesitation. The embrace was brief, warm, and real, the kind that asks for nothing and still leaves something behind. When they stepped apart, Lily saw that Naomi was smiling, just a little, just enough to make the grief in the room feel survivable. Then Naomi pushed the cart through the doorway and into the rain-cooled night. No one stopped her. No one called after her. They only stood there listening to the soft roll of the wheels across the front stone path until even that sound faded. And long after she